of the actions that we just performed. So left and right. Now remember, left and right is in reference to the animals, left and right. I don't care about your left and right. I need to know on the animal what is going on. Cranial towards the head, caudal towards the tail. Rostrils on the head towards the nose. My eyes are rostral to my ears. Dorsal towards the back, ventral towards the front, to ventilate. Medial towards the midline. Medial means middle. Lateral towards the sides. So my heart is medial, my arms are lateral. Deep, we talked about this. This is going to be through the epidermis, dermis into the muscular layer. Superficial would just be on the dermis, epidermis. Proximal towards my trunk. Distal, putting distance away from my trunk. My wrist is distal to my elbow, but my elbow is proximal to my wrist. That makes sense to everybody? Good. Palmar, this is on the front feet, the walking surface. And we talked yesterday about how we are plantigrade. Did we talk about that? Yeah. We are plantigrade, meaning we walk on the entire plantar surface of our feet. Dogs and cats are digigrade, meaning they walk on their digits. They walk on their toes. This whole part right here is the plantar surface of the foot. This is the equivalent of my heel. So you can see if they drop it down, then you have what would be like a human foot. And then here, right here, is the tarsus. If this is a back foot, carpus is in the front. Here we had our planes. All right, so
Miss Huff,
yes.
if like a cat or a dog has like a superficial cut on like the plantar side of the foot, how would you write that in a chart? Would it just be that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I would put that it was obviously left or right on the plantar surface, and I would probably use that it was either distal or proximal and use the toes as my landmark.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay.
Toes, which would be close to my toes, or away from my toes, or a distal. So I would use my proximal distal with my toes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. These are my planes. We got to remember those as just another little bit of review. So remember, we're separating stuff from other stuff. So what plane would it be if I'm separating my head from my tail? The transverse plane. What would it be if I'm separating my back from my front? The dorsal plane. And then my right from my left, not necessarily equal. And then equal, mid-sagittal, or nice. Remember that if you're practicing these on yourself, right, mid-sagittal, sagittal, transverse, sassy dance, dorsal. Remember though that these are the planes that we are looking at, a quadruped. So this quadruped is up like this, standing on his back feet like me, then this is the transverse, right here. But if I put him down into quadruped, now it's the same plane. We're still separating the head from the tail, but don't let that difference confuse you. That's why I say it's better, instead of memorizing them on you, which is okay, you can practice on yourself. It's easier to remember when we get into the quadruped versus the biped, what does it separate, what from what? Transverse will always separate head from tail, no matter how the animal is seen. And then remember, our extremities Even though this appears to be parallel to the dorsal plane, we know what is it? Because in this plane, we have the animal standing in this position. All right, so we talked a little bit about this picture yesterday. We talked about some of our descriptive terms. Let's go ahead and review those. So somebody give me a descriptive term if you are on the phone trying to tell me the location and the appearance of this wound. Well, first off, is it on the right side or the left side? It is on the, oops, that's a terrible marker. Bring my own markers in here. That's a terrible marker. Oh, that's a very bright light. The right. Is it more cranial or more caudal? A little more cranial. Is it more lateral or is it more medial? Yeah, it's actually lateral because lateral means on the side. So this would be right lateral. Deep or superficial? Very deep. What did we decide the cause of this was? Fence, because for why? Those. We got to get rid of those. In fact, what I would recommend is when we have this animal, because this animal obviously is going to have to go under anesthesia. We're going to have to irrigate this wound. We're going to have to try and put this muscle back together. And we're going to have to obviously maybe put it even in a drain tube. The body doesn't like to have big voids. It will fill up the void with fluid, and the fluid will stop the healing process. So we'll put a tube in to drain all of that excess fluid. Let's go ahead and take those off while we're there. Right? Do what? So, in theory, yes. In reality, no. We don't really do skin grafts on dogs and cats. Luckily, where this wound is, so the other thing we're going to need to do, let me go on here so I can, or not. Ugh. So what the first thing we need to do with this wound, just to give you an idea of you as a technician, is see how it's all ragged? We got to freshen up the cuts. So we're not going to go that far down, my finger slipped. We need to even up these these edges, make them not so ragged. Luckily, the area that this wound is a lot of excess skin. So we should be able to get good, it's called apposition, meaning the skin comes together nice without putting too much tension on those sutures. Honestly, I don't have an answer. So for you TV land, the question was, if we do a skin graft on an animal, would the hair grow back normally? And my answer is I don't know, because I have never seen nor have I ever heard of a skin graft being done. Generally what we would do, so let me give you a real life example. Had a dog jump out of a truck. It's Texas. It happens. It drives me insane. Nothing will make me punch you in the face or be rude to you as a client. Okay, not outwardly, you know, in my head. I'm rude to you. So the dog did what's called a partial degloving. And so you think of the big elbow gloves. Okay, who in here? Let's see who's going to be my BFF. Downton Abbey. My BFF.
Love Downton Abbey.
We got some on TV land, Downton Abbey. I love that show. That show is chicken soup for my soul. With the ugliness, honestly, it's on Amazon Prime. It's set in the 20s. Nothing happens. Well, some things happen, but honestly, you know, the worst. So I do Amazon Prime because no commercials, and I don't have real TV.
Okay, my grandma was watching it, and so whenever she came to stay with me for 3 weekends ago, they had the marathon still on, and so we got to watch the last season together.
It is just, it's some of the episodes, the worst thing that happens is they forget to run the dressing gong and they're late for dinner, and they always dress up every night in tuxes and jewels for just a family dinner. This is lords and ladies, and it's just in England, and it's lovely. And so with the ugliness happening in the world, right? You can't even get on social media. I can't even go on Facebook to catch up with my Canadian family without, you know, politics and coronavirus, and it's a hoax, and don't wear a mask, and blah, blah, blah. This I can just sit in Downton Abbey land, and my brain just goes, sometimes the only problem I want to deal with is that I'm 5 minutes late for dinner because the butler forgot to ring the dressing gong. Sometimes I need that. So anyway, they wear these fabulous elbow gloves. See, there was a point. See how I brought it back? See, you thought I was off the rail. Brought it back. And when they peel them off, right, imagine it comes off inside out. That's exactly what I'm talking about with the degloving injury. Is that it just comes off and degloves. That's why it's called that, because of the action of removing a glove. So this was a partial degloving, meaning that we had lost all of the tissue on the outer part, the lateral part of the leg, and the inner part of the leg, all of the tissue had come away from the underlying muscle. All of the connective tissue had been compromised. So we didn't have enough tissue, right? We can't take the edges of that and pull it around. It was too tight. And so what we ended up doing was we allowed for what was called, or what is called, granulation, meaning that we applied wet and dry wraps. You're never going to believe this, and I swear I'm not kidding with you. Honey, raw, natural honey. I'm not talking about the crap in the store in the Bear. That's not honey. I'm talking you go to the farmer's market and you get it from someone that just takes it fresh off the hive. Slather honey on it. And what the honey does, honey is a miracle drug, by the way. In veterinary medicine, we use it for everything. It is a natural antibiotic, so it's going to help to prevent any infection. It's a natural salve, meaning that it'll draw out any infection, and it also promotes healing. So slather it in honey, and then we allow the tissue and try and minimize the amount of non-elastic scar tissue, because then that leg will not work anymore. And so that's what we did. We don't do skin grafts. We'll use the natural ability to heal. So now, if you haven't watched it though, you should. It's fabulous. It's wonderful, and it gives your brain a break. Poor Edith. Gosh, Edith.
Why are they so horrible to you?
Because she's just a horrible person. Edith, I hate Edith. Edith is just the bane of my existence. She's just always so mopey and, oh, woe is me. Meh, meh, meh. I got left at the altar by an old man. Meh. Spoiler alert. All right, so this is the front paw of a dog. Tell me what the walking side is called if it's front. Palmar. Here's the back paw of a dog. Plantar. What's going on here? On the toenails. Yeah, these, we don't normally put these on dogs. I'm not really sure why this dog has them. These are little rubber caps that you put over the nails to prevent them from scratching up stuff. Usually we use those on cats. It's an alternative to declaw, so they can't claw up stuff. And I guess, I'm assuming they put them on the dog if you have hardwood floors or something like that. It'll prevent them from scratching them up. And they just glue on, they grow off, you replace them. All right, so here we have an animal that has had surgery. Get rid of that circle because that's going to drive everybody insane. There we go. That is not on the wheel. All right, first off, tell me what recumbency this animal is in. Dorsal recumbency. So tell me the term you would use to describe this incision. Right, so it's on the sagittal, mid-sagittal plane, on the medial line, right in the middle. So this is a midline or medial line incision. What's going on here? Yeah, those are nipples. Dogs have nipples. They're usually bilaterally symmetrical. If you have one, you got one on the other. However, they don't have to be. So here we have a nipple, here's a nipple, kind of going off into space. Had a client, so important for our clients to be educated. That's kind of our job, is client education. Had a client come in, he was just a nice guy. He's a giant teddy bear of a guy. You know the guys, he wears overalls all the time. Has this little wiener dog, this little dachshund. And he calls me up, and he's just this good old boy. And he says to me, funny, the dog's name was Johnson. You just clued in. Dog's name was John. That's why I remember. It was such an odd name for a dachshund. The wiener dog. Okay, just making sure you're all caught up. So he calls me up. He's one of my pet clients. You guys are going to get pet clients when you get out into clinic. These are clients that only want to deal with you. So he's one of my pet clients. He calls me up, says, hey, John's got a tick, big tick, can't get it off. Tried everything, monster of a tick. I said, all right, well, let's bring him on in. Let's see what we're dealing with here. I'm thinking like this is the Hulk, the, you know, a massive superhero of a tick. So he brings the dog in. This is the sweetest dog on the face of the planet. I used to be able to get jugular blood draws on this dog by myself with no one holding it. Just tell him to stand, and I just pop it, done. So I lift him up. You know, I said, well, where's the tick? It's on his belly. It's on his belly. Notice it yesterday. I tried everything. I was like, okay, well, what have you tried? I said, well, the monster tick. First, I tried, you know, gasoline. I was like, oh no, okay. Gasoline didn't work. Really? That's a shock. So then, tried to burn it off with a match. After he put gasoline on the dog. Thankfully, the dog did not burst into flames. So what do you mean you tried to burn it with a match? Well, he lit a match, blew it out, touched it to the tick. I said, okay. Yeah, when that didn't work, I just tried to pull that sucker off. And I'm like, oh no. Okay, let's see what we got going.
Okay, I have to know I'm dying laughing over here.
So I lift the dog, poor Johnson. And Johnson, not a peep, not a squeak. Lift him up. And it was not a tick. It was a nipple that was hanging by a thread. Oh. He had burned and gasolined and nearly pulled off this dog's nipple. Well, what had actually happened was he had never noticed it. So Johnson was a pink-skinned dog, right? Light-haired dog, pink-skinned dog. But he had one black nipple. Pigmented nipple. It happens. Well, the guy had never noticed it before and thought that black nipple was a tick. So I look and I'm like, oh, gee, okay. We're going to leave it alone. Because in my mind, you know, I am like, are you stupid? How stupid do you have to be? What did we learn? People are stupid. In the inside. And so on the outside, and I can tell, you know, he's very concerned. He took immaculate care of his dog. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to get the doctor on in here, but I need you to don't touch it. That's not a tick. He has a pigmented nipple and it's not actually attached anymore. Oh my God, the guy, I thought he was going to burst into tears. Burst into tears that he had tortured this poor dog's nipple. We had to amputate the nipple. So it was a simple surgery. We anesthetized, we did a little circular cut back together. No worries, no worries. The guy was so embarrassed. He brought the entire clinic lunch to apologize to us for his, and I'm like, why are you apologizing to me? Buy your dog something nice. But he was so embarrassed, but yes. Nipples, dogs, males have them too. All right, I need to move you guys out of the way. All right, so the general plan, the general map of an animal's body is the exact same as ours. Most, not all, most of our structures have pairs. I have a left arm, a right arm, a left leg, a right leg, a left kidney, a right kidney, a left lung, a right lung. But not all of them are going to be paired. Tell me some things that don't have a pair. Yeah, you've only got one liver. You've only got one bladder. You've only got one spinal cord. One heart. You're missing the big one. One brain. What do all these things have in common? Kind of our trick question early on a Thursday. All of them are in the middle. Brain, look at this. Nose, heart, bladder, liver. They're all on the midline. So all of our singular structures tend to be located on the midline. We have the dorsal cavity. Show me where your dorsal cavity is. Back here. Your dorsal cavity contains your brain and your spinal cord. Your ventral cavity, to the front, contains all of your organs. Your abdominal organs, like the liver, the bladder, the intestines, the stomach, what was I just going to say? The colon, and your heart and your lungs. Now, with these two cavities, we got a lot of stuff moving around inside of us. We're not usually aware of it, but think about this. Your heart is beating, hopefully all of the time, because if it isn't, you're in a little bit of trouble. Your lungs are inflating and deflating all of the time. Your intestines are writhing and burbling away inside your abdominal cavity. So think about, let's take your lungs for a specific example. I have this chest cavity, right? I'm actually, when you guys stop writing, I'll do it on the board right now, and then I will do it on the whiteboard for you guys, don't panic. I'm drawing a guy right here. Here's his hands. This is the division between my chest and my abdomen. Tell me the muscle that divides my chest and my abdomen. The diaphragm. Nice. Here I have a lung. And here I have a lung. So let's take our lungs for a minute. As they are inflating and deflating, you see how they're going to move and kind of come in contact with the wall of that inside of the chest cavity? So let's do an experiment real quick. The skin on my hands is much, much, much tougher than the tissue of my lungs. The tissue of your lungs, kind of why I hate to bring the C word in here, COVID. We get enough of that out there. But this is why it is so devastating a virus, because it attacks this incredibly delicate tissue of the lungs. And once that tissue is destroyed, it does not come back. It develops scar tissue. And that scar tissue does not convert and transport oxygen. So imagine, my hand's obviously much, much tougher. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys to put your hands together. So this hand represents my lung. This hand represents the inside of my chest cavity. Is everybody with me? So this hand is here, my lung. This hand is here, my chest cavity. And you can see as the lung inflates and deflates, it's going to rub and move over that chest cavity. So if I asked you, how many times a day do you think you breathe? Thousands of times. So let's take just the next half hour, the remainder of time we have in this class. And I ask you to put your hands together, and not hard, but just gently rub. After a few minutes, what happens? It starts to get warm. If I asked you to do this for the remainder of the day, what do you think might happen? Yeah, you're going to get chapped, you're going to get raw. You might actually start damaging the tissue because of friction. Well, but if my lungs are doing this every time you breathe, thousands of times a day for the entire length of time that you're alive, how is it we don't have just little bloody stumps of lung tissue? It's because of some specialized mucous membranes. So now imagine I have the same lung, thoracic, the inside of my cavity, but now instead of right friction, I take both my hands and I dip them here into this vat of Vaseline. Now when I put them together, what happens? There's no friction. Because what I have is that the tissue, my hands are not actually coming direct contact. We have a layer of Vaseline and a layer of Vaseline, and those two layers are allowing for some space. Obviously, I'm exaggerating the space. But now those two layers of Vaseline are allowing them to glide without actually coming in contact with each other. This idea of dipping your hands in the Vaseline, this mucous membrane, does have a special name. In the chest, the special name where's my pen go? There it is. In the chest, the special name is called the pleura. So pleura is just the name for the mucous membrane. But remember, how many of these mucous membranes do I have in the chest? 2. One on the lung, one on the organ, and one lining the chest cavity. So if I just say to you, there's a problem with the pleura, what's your first question? Which one? So I need a name for the one that's on the organ, and I need a name for the one that's on the cavity. Visceral. Visceral is the name for the organ. When you say the word viscera, it means organ. So when I say visceral pleura, pleura means literally the membrane in the chest. Visceral means the membrane that is on the lung. Parietal, which is how we say this word, parietal, this is the name for the membrane on the cavity. Still use the word pleura, because we didn't leave the chest. Pleura means membrane in the chest. If I say visceral, it's the membrane in the chest that's on the organ. If I say parietal, it's the membrane in the chest that's on the chest cavity. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, let's move down to our abdomen, because we've also got stuff moving around in there that could have friction problems. The membrane in the abdomen is called the peritoneum. That's how we say that word, peritoneum. Just like pleura meant chest cavity, peritoneum means abdominal cavity. But I also, just like in the chest, have to have a membrane on the organ and a membrane on the inside of the cavity wall. So the exact same words are used. If it's something on the organ, we use viscera. If it's on the cavity, we use parietal. So what would it be if I have a membrane on the organ in my abdomen?
Parietal pleura.
So you're very close, although do the opposite
Visceral
of
pleura.
words. So if it's on the organ in my abdomen, it would be the visceral peritoneum. There you go. So let me do share screen real quick, so that everyone can benefit from this. Oops, that's not what I want. All right. So I'm going to draw a guy here. I'm not a very good drawer. There's a lung and a lung. And we're just going to say these are the intestines. All right, so I have one membrane that is on the organs. And I have one membrane that lines the cavity. Everybody with me so far? All right, so green is on the cavity. If it is on the cavity, that means parietal equals cavity. The blue, I don't know if I spelled that right. Is there a C in there? Yeah. Visceral equals organ. This is simply telling you which membrane are we talking about. So if we look down here in the abdomen, the exact same thing. I'm going to have the blue, the viscera, lining the organ. So there's my visceral. I'm going to have the green lining the cavity. So these two words are just locational. If it's green, meaning parietal, it's lining the cavity. And it doesn't matter which cavity, we haven't gotten there yet. All it means is it's on the cavity wall. If it's visceral, the word visceral means on the organ. So we have to use one of these two locational terms. Now we have two more locational terms. If it is a membrane in the chest, it is pleura. if it is a membrane in the abdomen, peritoneal. So do you see how, in order for me to understand, if you are just conversing with me with no photo, and you are trying to tell me which membrane you're referring to, I have to use one of these terms, parietal or visceral, and one of these terms, pleura or peritoneal. One of them tells me which cavity am I referring to, and one of them tells me is it on the cavity or on the organ. So let me see, if I have a membrane on the organ in the chest, it would be the visceral pleura. If I have a, yes,
So are those just directional terms? Would we say the membrane of the visceral pleura, or would we just say?
visceral pleura implies the membrane itself. That is the name of the membrane. So if I'm referring to the membrane on the organs in the abdomen, visceral, peritoneum. If I am referring to the cavity of the abdomen, parietal, peritoneum. And if I'm referring to the organ in the abdomen, visceral, peritoneum. So this is telling me, is it on the cavity or on the organ? This is telling me which cavity am I referring to. So if I'm referring to the organ in the chest, the visceral pleura, visceral organ, pleura chest. Tell me organ in the abdomen. The visceral peritoneum. If it is the cavity in the chest, the parietal pleura. And if it is the cavity in the abdomen, the parietal peritoneum. So it's just, there are 4 words, we have to use 2 to describe the location. Does that make sense to everybody? Is everybody on the bus? How about you in TV land, you guys? Is everybody okay with that? I think that picture probably helped. I am not an artiste, but it gets the job done. Come on. All right, so our visceral pleura, visceral organ, pleura, chest. Visceral, we know organ, peritoneum, abdomen, parietal, cavity, pleura, chest, parietal, cavity, peritoneum, abdomen. There's actually a very painful condition that you may have heard of called pleurisy. And what pleurisy is where the Vaseline wears away. And we get what's called an adhesion because your body doesn't want the friction. And so what your body does is goes, oh God, I don't like that very much. Let's stick them together. And so you end up with this scar tissue that sticks your lung to the cavity so it can't properly inflate anymore. And it can't move across that cavity. And it's called pleurisy because we have inflammation of what? The pleuras. Any comments, questions, concerns about any of that? Excellent. All right, so the levels of organization, we're actually going to start pre-cell. We're going to talk about atoms. We're going to bond those atoms together into molecules. Then we're going to take those molecules and make cells. Everything in your body is made up of cells, and those cells know how to do a job. And that's the only job they're going to do forever and ever and ever. And those cells are going to divide and make exact replicas of themselves via, does anyone know what it's called when a cell divides into an exact replica? Mitosis. We got two different ways that cells can divide. Mitosis. Anyone know the other one? Meiosis. Mitosis is where we have an exact genetic replica. Meiosis is when we have a contribution from two different cells, making a new individual cell. We are meiosis. We have a little bit of our mom, we got a little bit of our dad, came together, made us. Mitosis is when we have an exact genetic replication. That's what we're going to concentrate on. These cells come together and make tissues. So we're going to talk about some of the different configurations of our tissues. Tissues make organs. So we're going to talk about the individual organs and then how those organs work together with other organs to create systems. Your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system, your urinary system, etc. So those are the levels of our organization. This is just another picture. Here I have my spinal, this is my dorsal cavity, okay? My ventral cavity, my diaphragm, and then in here would be the lungs, and you can see, remind me again, here's the lung. Remind me again, what was the term for the membrane on the cavity in the chest? The visceral.
Pleura.
Is it visceral if it's on the cavity? Parietal. Parietal on the cavity. Visceral. Viscera, medical terminology, guys. Viscera means organ. Have you ever heard, so those of you, you know, I am into like serial killers and that sort of thing. You ever heard the term eviscerate? What eviscerate means is that I cut you open and I pull out all your guts. Eviscerate, visceral organ. That's why it's called that word. So on the organ, it is the visceral. In the chest, it would be pleura. On the cavity in the chest, yeah, just yell it out. Parietal pleura. In the abdomen. In the abdomen, I have the membrane lining the cavity. So what is the term for lining the cavity? Parietal. And what is the term denoting that it's in the abdomen? Peritoneum. And then again, if it's on the organs, which is the intestines, visceral peritoneum. You ever heard, okay, so here's a word you know you've heard, I know you've heard. What would it be called if I had inflammation of the peritoneum? Now we're putting together $5 words, guys, med term. We know peritoneum. Tell me the suffix for inflammation. So now tell me what
Peritonitis.
peritonitis would be inflammation of those membranes. Well done, huzzah. Cells are the basic functional units for everything. They're going to come together and make tissues, which are specialized groups of cells that work together for a common job. Those have four basic types. We have epithelial cells. These are the cells that make up our skin. In fact, a lot of our structures are made up of epithelial cells. Connective tissue, tendons, ligaments. Ligaments hold bones and bones together. Tendons hold muscles to bones. Muscle. And then we have some subgroups of muscle. We talked about this the other day. We have cardiac muscle, we have skeletal muscle, and we have smooth muscle. And then finally, we have our nervous tissue, which is going to transmit messages to and from my brain. These tissues come together and create different organs. And then those organs come together as a group and create systems. So this is just one of those little review slides. Those are our levels of organization. Do I have any comments, questions, concerns so far? Everybody on the bus? Fantastic. I'll give you guys a minute. Still thinking of poor Johnson. God, I hadn't thought about that dog in a long time. Oh, the stuff that's going to stick with you throughout your career. Here's just a picture for you visual learners. Here we got a picture of some connective tissue. Again, tendons, ligaments, fat. Fat is a connective tissue. Here's our epithelial tissue. These are cells that are constantly shed, like our skin. Here we have our muscle tissue. This is a picture of skeletal muscle. I can tell because of the stripes. And this is a picture of our nervous tissue, the cells that transmit messages to and from my brain, causing movement and then allowing my brain to interpret my environment.
So the questions on the test would identify what type of tissue.
I'm not going to have a picture of a type of tissue and ask you to identify it. Absolutely not. What I may do is like put which one of these is not a type of muscle. And I would have like skeletal, cardiac, smooth, and then some random answer. So health is the normal anatomy and physiology of the animal. And we must take steps not only to help heal the animal in times of stress and illness and injury, but also to maintain their health. When we get into nutrition next term, that's a great big one as far as maintaining the health of our pets. Being able to provide them with the appropriate nutrition to help them replace and repair any damage. I always got to put a sprinkling of nutrition because that's my all-time favorite class to teach. And I get very excited. I only get to teach it every other term, and I'm very excited to do it again next term. Homeostasis. Homeo means what?
Same.
Yeah, homeo or homo means the same. Homogeneous means everything is the same. Homeostasis. What is stasis? Just to maintain. So homeostasis is to maintain the sameness. We want to get an animal who is healthy and we just want to keep him healthy. That's all this means. It's a fancy word for maintain the status quo. We want to have balance in all of our structures. Everything is working together optimally. And we have appropriate blood pressure and blood gases and acid-base balances and oxygen levels. So all of these are contributing to our homeostasis. Homeo or homo means the same. Stasis means to maintain. And that is the end of chapter 1. All right, so now what I would like to do is, so I'm going to turn off this projector real quick. So that I can do this. All right, so I would like to share with you for the last 10 minutes some examples of some test questions. You may or may not see these on your test tomorrow, but it will give you an idea of some of the wording that could be on all right. Sorry, I had to get my test generator here. All right, so here are a few examples of some of the questions. It's going to be true and false multiple choice. Oh, here's a good one. Let me start you out with a softball, shall I? Okay, true or false? An anatomic plane is an imaginary slice through an animal's body. That is true. True or false? Single structures in the body are generally located near the lateral aspect. Yeah, because where are our single structures located? In the middle. All right, I'm going to use some directional terms. True or false? The intestines are located in the ventral body cavity, caudal to the diaphragm. So what is the ventral body cavity? In the front. Where's caudal? So first off, where's your diaphragm? Here. Where's caudal to your diaphragm? Here. So that would be true. Well done. True or false? The endocrine system is composed of glands and hormones. That is in fact true. Endo, meaning into, crine, the blood, the endocrine system is the system that has glands and hormones that govern all the parts of your body. Go back, we learned that when we went over and did a handshake howdy do to all of the systems. All right, true or false? Smooth muscles move the bones of the skeleton and are under conscious control. That is false, because what are the muscles that are attached to the skeleton? The skeletal muscles.
Where is smooth muscle located?
Smooth muscle would be all of your organs, for example, your intestines. What is the term that, now remember, all of these questions, refer them to a quadruped. Okay, if you start referring these questions to you, you're going to have some issues. So what is the term that would mean up in a quadruped? Dorsal. That's why I'm warning you on this test and giving you guys a gift here, because I don't normally do this, because I'm literally reading from the question bank that your test is going to be made of. Don't tell anyone. If you were thinking of it on yourself, what would you immediately have said? Right, but what are we thinking of? Quadruped. So up would be dorsal. What would down? Ventral. What is the plane that divides the body into a cranial and caudal parts that are not necessarily equal. The transverse. I am going to have some questions that are going to refer to a photo. So I'll have the photo and then it'll be like, where is this dog's elbow? So let me ask you this. Where is my elbow in relation to my shoulder? Distal. Where is my hip in relation to my knee? Proximal. Where are my toes in relation to my tarsus? Distal. So make sure you know that, proximal, distal, because I am going to ask you some questions referring to that. Where are my eyes in relation to my ear? Rostral. Very nice. Time flies when we are having fun, but that's basic general wording. Give you an idea of the depth to which we're going to go. Go back and review your body systems. I'm going to ask you some specific questions about those. Make sure you understand visceral, pleural, peritoneal, and parietal. And then, of course, all of your directional terms. Practice your dance. Practice your dance. Questions, comments, concerns?
The book, there's like the table where it has the directional terms and it's like the places, basically like places on Mars. We need to know this as well.
I'm not going to test you over equine terms. So if it's not the terms that are specific, because I know equine terms, you have things like your pole, your withers, you have the cannon bone, you have the splint bones. No. However, in the animal, we do have things like the stifle and the hock. Stifle is the knee, hock is the ankle. So, but the equine terms, no. Pole, withers, those sort of things, I am not going to test you over those. All right, so any other comments, questions, concerns? All right, well, I will see you guys tomorrow, TV Land. I'll see you tomorrow again on Zoom. I will see you, my live studio audience will be in TV Land. So I love that I call you audience. That just makes me happy. It does. It just makes me happy. So I will see you guys tomorrow. We'll do a little bit more review first thing in the morning. Just make sure nobody has any questions. We'll be moving on to chapter 2, and we're going to turn and burn with chapter 2 because a lot of it's going to be review. I spent a little bit more on time on chapter 1 because this was all new information for you. All right, so I'll see you guys in TV Land tomorrow. Have a wonderful
See you tomorrow.
day. Bye.
Bye, Miss Huff. See you tomorrow.
See ya.